In today's video, we are going to be using absolute value to find the distance between 2 points on a coordinate grid. So there's a few things that we have to think about when we're talking about using absolute value on a coordinate grid. One, we need to know what a coordinate grid is. We need to be able to determine the x and y values for each point in our coordinate grid. And then we need to be able to determine if we are going to subtract these numbers or add them using absolute value in order to determine the distance between the 2 points. So let's start by talking about what is a coordinate grid. By definition, a coordinate grid is an intersection of an x and a y axis on a 2D plane. My x-axis is this horizontal line that goes from left to right on my page. And the y-axis is a vertical line that goes from top to bottom or from bottom to top. The next thing that we need to talk about is what does 2D mean, or two-dimensional, and that basically means that it is flat. So everything that I draw on this paper, so this coordinate grid is two-dimensional because I drew this on a piece of paper. There is nothing three-dimensional about it. It is not coming up off of the page. You might think about going to a movie. Typically movies are 2D, but sometimes you will get those glasses that make things pop out of the screen. And that adds another dimension to the movie because it looks like things have shape to them. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to determine the x and y values of the points in our coordinate grid. The first thing that we need to focus on is how we're going to record a point on our coordinate grid. We are always going to have our x coordinate first, followed by our y coordinate. So let's go ahead and start with A. We're going to find where point A is on our coordinate grid, and then we're going to use these numbers in order to figure out how we're going to label this. Well, if we look at A, our x coordinate comes first, and we need to determine how far to the left it is on our coordinate plane. And we would come over to -5, and we could see that A is at -5. That's the location it is at in terms of its x value. So let's go ahead and fill that in. Coordinates are always recorded inside of parentheses like this, so we have -5. It's very important that we have this negative here out in front of it. Now we're going to look at the y value. So that means we're looking at the y axis, which is up and down. So how far down does A come? 1, 2, 3, 4, -4. So we would go ahead and fill that in for the y value of point A. So point A is at -5, -4. If from what I have just shown you is review, I would go ahead and stop the video here, rewind it, and then go ahead and record the coordinate points yourself, just to see if you remember correctly. Let's go ahead and find the coordinates for point B in our grid. If we look, it's directly up from A. So I know that the x value for both A and B needs to be the same, which was -5. And then we need to determine its y value, which we can see it is 1 up from the baseline or from that x-axis. So it's going to be a +1. If we look at point C, we are at 6 on the y-axis. So that's our second point. Sometimes you can do them in the opposite order. I always like to do x and then y, though. I know I'm doing the opposite right now just to show you that it's possible. So it's 6 high, and how many to the right is it? 1, 2, 3. So my x value would be a +3. Point D would be at 7, 6. Point E would be at 3, 1. And I went ahead and filled in 3 for the x-coordinate on F because I can see that it is directly down from E, so I know that that has to be the same x-coordinate. And then if we look at our y-coordinate, it would be at 1, 2, 3, so -3 because it is below that x-axis. And there we have it. We have all of our points determined, and now we can talk about finding the distance between these points. So let's first calculate the distance between C and D. This is going to follow our typical pattern of distance where you would actually subtract these two numbers from each other to find out the distance between them. So if we look at C and D, their x and y coordinates, we can see that they both have a y coordinate of 6. We know this when we look at the picture because we can see that they are in line with each other horizontally. So we are going to be using the x coordinates to calculate the distance between them. So if we want to calculate the distance between these 2 points, since these two are the same, we're going to be looking at the x coordinates 7 and 3. And I am going to just actually take the difference of these two numbers. So we're going to take 7 minus 3, and we would get 4. So the distance between C and D is 4. The reason that we can just subtract these two numbers is because they are in the same quadrant of the coordinate grid. Let's take a quick break to just discuss the different quadrants. This top right quadrant is quadrant 1. And it is that way because both our x and y coordinates are both positive. Quadrant 2 on the upper left corner here is characterized by an x coordinate that is negative and a y coordinate that is positive. Quadrant 3 is characterized by both an x and a y coordinate both being negative. And quadrant 4, the points would have a positive x coordinate and a negative y coordinate. So we need to talk about where does absolute value play a part in finding the distance between points on a coordinate plane. And it happens when we have coordinates that come from different quadrants. So we're going to find the distance between E and B. So if we look at points E and B, we can see that they have the same y value. So we're going to be really paying attention to the x values here to determine how far away they are from one another. So we are trying to find the distance between E and B. B was the point -5, 1, and E is the point 3, 1. We're not focused on our y coordinates. They are the same, so we are focusing on the distance between our x values. And this is where absolute value is going to come in. We cannot just simply subtract 3 from -5. Okay, if we were to take -5, subtract 3, this would actually equal -8. Okay, we do not have a distance between these points of -8. That would be the absence of 8, whatever units you are, between these 2 points. It just does not make sense logically. And that's why when we talk about distance, okay, when we talk about distance, we need to use absolute value. Okay, there's the relation. Distance, we need to use absolute value. So to find the distance between these points, we're going to take the absolute value of both of them. So the absolute value of -5 plus the absolute value of 3. We're going to go ahead and find the absolute value of -5, which would just be 5. Plus the absolute value of 3, which is 3. How far away is 3 from 0? 3. And so our answer here would be 8. Our 2 points, B and E, are 8 units apart from one another. Let's go ahead and look at our graph or our coordinate grid to see if they truly are 8 units away from each other. So let's just go ahead and count. This is something that you could do if you had the visual there for you to use. So here's B to E. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 units apart from one another. And if we want to think about this, our x value for this was -5. Well, look at this. To get to 0, I had to move 5 places, right? That's that absolute value of -5. It's 5 units away from 0, where that y-axis is, where 0 is. And then the absolute value of 3, or just these 3 units, to make it over to where E is. And that's how we would get our 8 units for our answer. Let's go ahead and do one more example. We're going to find the distance between E and F, and we can see that our x-coordinates this time are the same. They are both 3. So we're going to be finding the absolute value and distance between the y-coordinates here. if we were to go ahead and just count this out to begin with, so E is 1 away from the x coordinate, or the x-axis, I should say, and F is 1, 2, 3 units down from the x-axis. So I would guess that our answer here, or our distance, is going to be 4, but let's go ahead and calculate that using absolute value. So we're going to go ahead and find the distance between E and F. Remember that our x coordinates are the same, so we're not going to worry about those. We're finding the distance between the y coordinates here. So 1 and -3. And since we cross over to a different quadrant, okay, from quadrant 1 to quadrant 4, we're going to add these together and use absolute value to find the distance. So we would have the absolute value of 1. It's going to look like 3 lines, but that's fine, plus the absolute value of -3. We go ahead and simplify this. Absolute value of 1 is 1. The absolute value of -3, well, it's 3 away from 0. 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. So the distance between E and F would be 4 units. So there you have it, how to use absolute value and a coordinate grid in order to find the distance between 2 points.